Alright, this is episode 28. No sure, Vigilante. Of course, until I didn't know this. If I assume, right? Well, until I didn't know this, right? Of course, eventually. If I assume, right? Of course. Until I didn't know this, right? Well, I'm sure you realize that, Vigilante. Until you didn't know this, right? If I assume, of course. I have no idea, right? Eventually. Until I didn't know this. So, if I kiss him? Yep. Okay. So, you have no idea, right? Yep. So, if you kiss him? Of course. Until you didn't know this? Nope. Okay. So, you didn't know this? Nope. Okay. I'm sure eventually. Did I realize that? Yep. If you assume. Of course. You have no idea, right? Yep. If you assume eventually. Of course. Until I didn't know this. You know? Eventually. Of course. Did I realize that eventually? I know, right? If you assume. Yep. If you assume eventually. Of course, you have no idea, right? Well, if you assume. Yep, for some reasons, well, I have no idea. If you assume, right? Eventually. Well, until you notice. Nope, if you assume, eventually. Of course, you have no idea. I know, right? If you assume, yep. Cause you have no idea, right? If you assume, eventually. Of course. I have no idea, right? If you assume. Yep. If you assume, usually. Until I didn't know this, right? So, how do you know this? I know. If you assume, usually. Yep, because I said so, usually. You didn't know this, right? If you assume. Yep, because you said so. I know, right? If you assume usually. Of course, you have no idea, right? Well, if you assume usually. Yep, if you assume. Of course. I have no idea, right? Yep, if you assume usually. Of course. Did I realize that visually? Until I did notice? Right. Sure you realize that? Yep. If you assume usually? Of course. You have no idea, right? Yep. If you assume usually? Of course. until you know this, right? Oh, if you consume. Yep, until you know this, right? So, if you consume. Yep, until you know this, right? If you consume, Julie. Of course, you have no idea, right? If you consume, yep, if I consume Julie, of course, you have no idea, right? Yep, if you consume Julie, of course, you have no idea. I know, right? If you consume, yep, if I consume Julie, until you notice, nope, if you consume, yep, cause you have no idea, right? Yep, if you consume Julie, of course, you have no idea. I know, right? If you consume, yep, okay. For some reasons, well, you have no idea, right? Yeah, yep, okay. Yeah, sure realize that. For some reasons, if you consume, yep, cause you have no idea, right? I know. For some reasons, yep, if you consume Julie, of course. Until you know this, nope, if you consume, right. Did I realize that? Yep, if you consume Julie, of course. Until you know this, nope, if you consume, right. Of course. I know, right? Yep, if you consume, of course. You have no idea, right? Yep, if you consume Julie. Of course. Until you know this? Nope. Okay.